Electronics, and in this video we'll be talking about some risks relevant to large deficits. Okay, so we know that a large deficit has to do with government borrowing and spending. So the government does spend on things like national defense, healthcare, education, so on and so forth. Okay, and it borrows money from banks and investors, okay, through the buying and selling bonds. It will lead to a strong or large deficit. Okay, now because of this deficit, okay, you have certain things that will happen. Okay, so let's assume that the government runs into a large deficit sometime soon. So let's say this is a large deficit. All right, so basically, what's going to end up happening is, okay, if the government or demand for government services, certain services, as the population ages, okay, goes up. Okay, let's say healthcare. If the demand for healthcare goes up because of the baby boomers, okay, what's going to end up happening is the government borrowing and spending will even grow further. Okay, so let's say demand for healthcare goes up. What's going to end up happening is, okay, government spending will grow even further. Okay, and as government spends and borrows more money, it goes further into debt. Okay, so this is debt. And as it tries to finance that debt, as it tries to pay off that debt through interest payments, okay, often we see that the governments, they don't have enough money for other types of payments they need to make, okay, such as education, healthcare, defense, so on and so forth. Okay, so the interest payments, they pull the resources away from domestic investments as well. Okay, so basically, as government increases spending and borrowing, okay, what's going to end up happening is, okay, your private firms will be able to borrow less, right? Because if you have a bank, for example, and the bank basically buys government bonds, it does not have access reserves. So we've talked about access reserves in the past. Does not have access reserves to lend money to private firms and businesses, which means private firms and businesses do not have the money to invest in capital investments such as equipment, labor, land, machinery, so on and so forth. Okay, so it pulls resources away from other types of investments. Okay, pulls resources away from other types of investments, from other investments. All right, so that has to do with demand. Now, apart from this demand, okay, you also have to think about, okay, the interest rates. Okay, so as the government goes into a deficit, as the government borrows and spends money, okay, the economy may go into a recession, okay, of some sort. Okay, as a result of which you do have high interest rates to worry about as well, is because um, before the economy goes into a recession, it's possible that the economy goes into an inflation, and this is when the central banks may raise the interest rates up, okay, to control the inflation. Okay, and because the interest rates are high up, okay, financing expenses, the financing expenses relevant to the debt, okay, those financing expenses go up. Okay, so interest rates go up, okay, and this has to do with cost of financing debt. And we know that interest payments are one of several payments that governments have to worry about when it comes to spending their budget. Okay, so they do have to worry about education, healthcare, infrastructure, so on and so forth. So this is cost of financing that goes up. And as the government is able to spend less money on infrastructure, for example, such as healthcare, transportation, roads, and so on and so forth, and what's going to end up happening is your GDP will go down because government spending makes up a big chunk of GDP and aggregate demand. Okay, so cost of financing goes up, okay, which means government does not have enough money for other types of spending. Government does not have, does not have enough money, enough money for infrastructure development, for infrastructure development. All right, as a result of which your GDP goes down. The GDP goes down. All right, and you do have a contractionary effect on aggregate demand as well, which means aggregate demand goes down. All right, now apart from that, okay, you also have to worry about rising percentage of debt to GDP. We've talked about debt to GDP ratio. Okay, usually the governments have to worry about the debt to GDP ratio, where the growth in debt should be less than the growth in GDP. Okay, for good financial health. All right, as a result of which, if the growth in debt is higher than the growth in GDP, okay, the economy will move further into recession. Economy moves into recession because the national debt goes up. As the national debt goes up, okay, the government borrows money from international investors, for example, okay, by selling them bonds, by having them invest, okay, in domestic banks, so commercial banks within the nation. As a result of which, a foreign investment in capital goes up, okay, money is being pumped into the reserve of the banks, okay, through other policies, expansionary policies, okay, so on and so forth. So we have a long list of events that may create an inflation and recession. Okay, so as investment goes up, foreign investment goes up, okay, the inflation may go up as well, okay, because money's being pumped into the system, and you already have a weak currency, okay, because of government spending. So currency is weak, purchasing power goes down, inflation goes up, and when the monetary policies and fiscal policies kick in to control inflation, you have a recession, okay, if they're not imposed on a moderate level. Okay, so this is economy moves towards recession. Okay, and that is because of rising debt to GDP ratio. So this is debt to GDP ratio. Okay, All right, so these are some of the impacts or some of the events that follow a large deficit, which may lead to a recession or even a depression. All right, so that'll be it for this video. On behalf of V Electronics, this is Obey. Have yourself a great day.